This program proudly brought to you by Citibank, bringing the spirit of competition to personal banking, and Ansett Australia, one of the world's great airlines.
Good evening, I'm Sandra Sully. This is the Late Night News. Heading the Late Night News, more uncertainty facing the Liberals as WA decides to keep Noel Crichton-Browne out. Party leaders continue their sparring as they prepare for the next federal election. And an anti-nuclear message as the Nobel Committee gives the coveted Peace Prize to a long-time campaigner. But first tonight, fears of new unrest within the Liberal Party. The Western Australian branch tonight rejected an appeal by Senator Noel Crichton-Browne to be readmitted. The former power broker was expelled from the party last month after a series of public misdemeanours. But the State Council has rejected the Senator's argument that he was denied natural justice.
As long as there's breath in my body, I won't reward treachery, and I don't think the Liberal Party ought to reward treachery. And if my reputation and the party's reputation is damaged by those who seek to tear the party down and tear me down through the media, well, I'll pursue it the way I have to.
And that'll be in the courts?
Well, it's certainly an option.
The Senator says legal action is now a very attractive option. Prime Minister Paul Keating has again attacked John Howard's vow to protect the poor and disadvantaged, claiming the opposition will cut $10 billion from government spending. Mr Keating described the coalition's new image as a road to Damascus conversion, which voters should not believe.
Paul Keating arrived in the heart of the Bathurst territory by train to open a new $25 million bus rail interchange at Blacktown in Sydney's west. Pressing the flesh with the locals, the Prime Minister received a standing ovation and harked back to the days he rode a pushbike to Blacktown.
You have to give John Howard the Gregories to get out to Blacktown. He'd need an army map. He'd need an army map to get out here. I reckon I could get my old pushbike and to get out here by itself.
The Prime Minister launched a blistering attack on John Howard's commitment yesterday to bury previous hardline policies, promising to maintain the present system of social support.
I'll give you a bit of good advice. Don't believe him. Don't believe him.
And the Prime Minister warned 16 of the 19 members on the coalition's front bench developed the fight-back policies.
It's been like group therapy. They've all had the Paulian conversion on the road to Damascus. They've all seen the light in 3 years.
But one Liberal who has seen the light, former New South Wales Premier John Fahey. After losing the state election, the Liberal leader retired from the political spotlight. But now Mr Fahey has won pre-selection for a federal seat in a rural area southwest of Sydney. The Liberals need a swing of just over 1% to take the seat from Labor. Stephanie Kennedy, 10 News.
A prison ESCAPEE in the far north of Western Australia is believed to be wounded and too frightened of police to surrender. Raymond Rankin was allegedly shot on the foot by police as he escaped across a river near Kununurra and is said to be in fear of his life.
Right! Gentlemen!
At dawn, we were to meet 36-year-old ESCAPEE Raymond Rankin to hear his side of the story. But 50 kilometres outside Kununurra, only the hot ashes of the fugitive's remote campfire and a cooking pot remained.
This morning.
Rankin has been on the run now for almost 2 weeks after being busted out of the Kununurra lockup. A week ago, police tracked him to a bush camp near Ivanhoe Crossing.
A crocodile was seen to come out straight across here. The 2 officers shouted to him, but it's not known whether he heard it or not. But they saw the crocodile getting a bit closer. They fired a couple of shots at the crocodile.
Ray Rankin is still out here somewhere in this rugged country. It's understood that he wants to give himself up, but not to the local police force at Kununurra.
John Flint says Rankin won't go to local police because he was shot in the foot at the Ivanhoe Crossing incident.
He certainly got a wound that would indicate something had penetrated it. Yeah. It looks like there's a gap between the healing skin that should have been stitched. Quite clean, quite clean.
Still trying to negotiate Rankin's surrender, Mr Flint has contacted Perth Police and is concerned for his granddaughter, who's now joined the ESCAPEE on the run.
It's the reason why I'm assisting Rankin in the first place. I don't want her to come to any grief of any description.
With 2 police internal investigators set to begin inquiries here tomorrow, Mr Flint says Rankin should give himself up to them. In Kununurra, Tony Dean, 10 News.
And still in Western Australia, and the state will be isolated by air next Tuesday because of planned industrial action. Both Qantas and Ansett have suspended all flights into, out of and within the state because of a 24-hour strike. The ACTU-endorsed union blockade is to protest at the government's second wave of industrial relations reforms. The RSPCA has taken the unprecedented step of extraditing someone from interstate following the brutal killing of a pet dog. As a result, a 21-year-old man has faced a Sydney court charged with animal cruelty.
Rex, a 2.5-year-old Kelpie cattle dog cross, was found dead last month. 9-year-old Cameron Walker raised the alarm when he noticed his pet had disappeared from the family backyard in Adaminaby near the Snowy Mountains. His father Graham found the dog, bound with a rope, in a nearby reserve.
Cameron's been affected to some extent when he still has memories of it, so every now and again he'll have a bit of a nightmare or a bad turn.
Police arrested 21-year-old Dean James O'Neill in Queensland, extraditing him to Sydney overnight.
O'Neill is charged with aggravated cruelty to an animal. He's entered no plea and was refused bail. He's due to appear in Cooma Court next Wednesday.
The allegations have shocked seasoned RSPCA officers.
I've never seen a case so blatant in 8 years of service as an investigator with the RSPCA, and I believe that would be excruciating pain and suffering by the animal before death intervened.
It's the first time the organisation has used its powers to initiate an extradition.
RSPCA simply couldn't turn a blind eye to this sort of issue.
2 boys, aged 13 and 15, have also been summoned. They're expected to appear in Cooma Children's Court. Michelle Stone, 10 News.
When the late night news continues, a warning for France from the Nobel Committee. Fighting flares again in Bosnia. And forget noisy car alarms, here's a new way to deter car thieves. You're watching the late night news. Although it's being called a clear message to France, world leaders do not expect this year's Nobel Peace Prize award to have much effect on Paris. The awards committee says the recent French nuclear testing in the Pacific did influence its decision. Its choice this year, veteran anti-nuclear physicist Joseph Rotblat.
Now 86, Joseph Rotblat said today he was overwhelmed by the award of the prize. He said he knew he'd been nominated, but didn't have much hope, as the award usually went to politicians, not scientists.
Let me tell you, when I woke up this morning, I didn't expect that I shall become such a celebrity today and have all these cameras.
Despite his shock, he quickly made clear what he sees as the significant impact of the prize.
I hope that more scientists will now be encouraged to think seriously about the social impact of their work. They'll devote a little bit of time, like Ramas and Pagwash did, to find ways to prevent the dangers which come to society from the progress of science and technology.
Professor Rotblat came to Britain in the 1930s, a Jewish refugee from Poland. After war broke out in 1939, he joined the American Manhattan Project to make the atom bomb, because he shared the fears that Germany might get the bomb first. Once it was clear Germany had given up trying to develop its own bomb, he returned to Britain. Later, when the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, he was devastated. With leading American and Russian scientists, and with the backing of Einstein, he set up the Pugwash Conference, named after the village in Canada where it first met. The signing of the Test Ban Treaty in 1963 owed much to the Pugwash scientists and their anti-nuclear lobbying. The Nobel Committee said the recent French nuclear weapons tests had played a role in the decision to give Professor Rotblat the prize, a recognition of the continuing effort to eliminate nuclear weapons.
Peace seems as far away from Bosnia-Herzegovina as ever. With the latest ceasefire just 3 days old, fierce fighting has flared again, with Serb leaders vowing to reclaim territory they lost last month. The battles have sparked a new flood of some 40,000 refugees.
The critical front line is in the northwest around Sanski Most, the latest prize seized by the Bosnian army from the Serbs in the final hours before the ceasefire. Here, fighting has continued and still continues as if there were no ceasefire. The UN has no troops on the ground here and is concerned about the possible collapse of the entire agreement.
And in fact, our assessment would be that around that area there has not been a ceasefire, purely a continuation of hostilities around that area.
There are signs tonight of a further massive flight of Serbian refugees in the area. As many as 40,000 of them may have fled the town of Prijedor, which was already swollen with refugees from Sanski Most. It may be difficult for the Bosnian Army's 5th Corps, which took Sanski Most and threatens Banja Luka, to stop in its tracks and hold fire in the face of counterattacks. The war has a momentum of its own, and the 2-week delay before the start of peace talks is an open opportunity for conflict. The will for peace is weakened by further atrocities, the discovery of a mass grave near Yaitse, where 15 people were buried who were murdered 3 years ago, and more Muslims expelled from the Banja Luka region. The attitude of the United Nations here is increasingly one of exasperation, that for all its firepower, it cannot make peace happen. That is for the peoples themselves, for their governments and their armies. The UN itself isn't even trying to implement this latest ceasefire. It doesn't have the men for that and doesn't have the mandate. It is depending on the goodwill of the two sides. And around Sanski Most, there isn't any.
Nature is still battering the United States with fires and searing heat to hurricanes and floods. San Diego County in California is still battling huge scrub fires that have claimed dozens of homes. More than 2,000 hectares have been blackened in this outbreak, which is sweeping the same territory devastated 4 years ago. And in Florida, Hurricane Opal is still making its presence felt. The storm strengthened rapidly overnight and thousands woke to find a major hurricane again threatening. Many were trapped on highways when Opal changed direction, cutting off their escape and forcing many to return. American sanctions against Iraq will remain in force for another year after a UN report found they still had nuclear and biological weapons. The announcement came as Iraqis prepare for their first referendum to pick a president from just one candidate.
It's not exactly election fever, but it's the closest they've been. President Saddam, we love you with our hearts, they chanted, because you humiliated America. His place in the affections of his people, the official press here says, is the mother of all facts. This morning, would-be voters were checking the electoral roll. The Americans have condemned Sunday's vote as a sham. The Iraqis say it's the start of a process.
It is not just a demonstration. It is the first step in the process of transmission towards constitutional legality.
On the streets, it's impossible to find critics of the president.
He's here in our heart. Yes. He's here in our spirits. He's our president.
In one of the biggest mosques, the imam urged them to pray for their president and for an end to sanctions. Every Friday after prayers, hundreds of hard-up worshippers get fed. It's the best meal most of these people have all week. Because they blame the West for their misfortunes, there's real support for President Saddam here. His son, Uday, the second most powerful man in the land, was supporting Iraq's football team this afternoon. They beat Qatar 3-2, putting them a step closer to the Atlanta Olympics. Everybody in this country knows what will happen on Sunday. President Saddam Hussein will score a decisive victory. An Iraqi official here said this morning that he may even get 100% of the votes.
Jeremy Bowen reporting there. Thousands of Irish loyalists have rallied through Belfast to celebrate the first anniversary of their ceasefire, which followed the IRA truce. While demanding bilateral talks be called soon, their leaders promised to disarm as soon as the IRA did.
Loyalists converged on Belfast city centre from north, south, east and west in a demonstration intended both to mark the anniversary of their ceasefire and to show their continuing strength on the ground. Banners called for the release of paramilitary prisoners now, and Loyalist leaders said the turnout proved that they should be included fully in the political process.
That's our money. Thousands upon thousands of people. And the will put out the vote. The sooner we have elections, the better. The sooner we have dialogue, the better. That dialogue begins now.
In the run-up to their ceasefire a year ago, Loyalist paramilitaries claimed more lives in Northern Ireland than the IRA. Today, their political representatives reiterated their apologies to the loved ones of all innocent victims.
12 months on, the Loyalist ceasefire has held far more firmly than some observers might have guessed. Loyalists say there's no threat to the peace from their side, but they want to hear unequivocally from Republicans that the war, as they term it, is over for good.
Many of us know the frustration of blaring car alarms that won't stop, but not many of us can end the agony, at least legally. Yes, but one bright spark in America has solved his problem. In place of a noisy alarm that no longer deters most car thieves, he's fitted an SDM, or smoke defence mechanism. And it's simple. As soon as a would-be thief breaks into the vehicle, the SDM fills it with smoke, blinding the intruders so he can't make off with your pride and joy. The only cold water coming from fire departments who fear a rash of false alarms. I should say police believe gangs are responsible for the stabbing of 2 youths early today. Now, that story after the break. And all the grace of the feline world on display in New York. New South Wales police have again run into a wall of silence as they investigate an overnight stabbing. 2 Asian youths were attacked at a restaurant in Sydney's Chinatown early today. One remains in a serious condition with stomach wounds. 12 Asian youths aged between 16 and 23 were questioned for several hours over the incident, but no charges have yet been laid. Police believe the attack was gang-related and called in the Asian crime unit Task Force Oak to help with investigations. 2 of Australia's rarest and most expensive books are up for sale in Melbourne. One of the works, a 15th century Bible, is one of the first books ever printed and is now valued at well over $200,000.
The Australian Antiquarian Book Fair is an annual event staged either in Melbourne or Sydney. But this year the event has 2 remarkable works on display. This 15th century Bible was printed by Peter Schoeffer, an apprentice to Johann Gutenberg, who printed the Bible of Gutenberg, the most famous book in the world. The Bible is the oldest and only complete book printed by Peter Schoeffer known in Australia.
I know of no other copy on the market in the world at the present moment, and I don't think there has been for a long time. I think there are only about 30 copies of it known in the world, and most of those are in institutions.
The Bible is considered one of the finest examples of early printing, made specifically to look as though it was handwritten. Another book crafted with love, John Gould's Birds of Australia. The set of 8 books is valued at $315,000 and is one of the few sets in the world available for private sale. The set is considered Australia's greatest and most lavishly produced bird series, containing 681 folio-size hand-coloured lithographs. Dealer Andrew Isles says it will be a special collector who purchases the set.
It is not the kind of thing that people necessarily buy for investment. It is obviously a lot of money, but you have to approach a book like that with a great love of books and often with a great love of Australian birds and that sort of thing.
Enthusiastic collectors of rare books are making the most of seeing some of the finest works available in Australia. Loreen Deal, 10 News.
We've all heard of slip, slop, slap, but now there's a new weapon in the war against skin cancer. One Sydney council has put a roof over a park to shelter kids from the sun. While the Cancer Council says it's a great idea, some locals aren't so sure.
It looks like a giant green tent, but it's Illawarra Council's way of protecting kids from skin cancer. It was built after the council received legal advice it may be sued in future years by children who develop cancer.
If we've provided these fixtures, the playground equipment, we have a duty of care to make them as safe as possible.
The council fears skin cancer, like passive smoking, may turn into a legal minefield. The council is planning to erect similar structures at 2 other local parks, but some residents are opposing the move, claiming the covers are an eyesore. Others say the whole idea is misguided.
You could go to ridiculous extremes and put a canopy over the whole of the harbour. It's just not feasible.
Daryl Hughes fears the next trend may be roofs over beaches.
Make sure they wear appropriate clothing, make sure they wear appropriate hats. That's the most important thing, not just the 10 or 15 minutes that they play in in a playground.
Look, I'm all for education. I was a high school teacher, but there's limits. And $10,000 isn't a lot of money if it's going to save any child from developing skin cancer.
On that point, the Cancer Council agrees.
The Cancer Councils will be recommending that wherever possible, shade structures or shade areas, such as that provided by trees, might be implemented.
Josie McRae, 10 News.
Despite concern about their effects on wildlife, household pets are not likely to vanish, especially with such a variety. This exhibition in New York boasts no less than 50 different breeds. It includes some rarely seen, like the latest to win acceptance, the pixie bob, that often has 6 or more toes. The munchkin is another, dubbed the dachshund of cats, with its short front legs. Then there's the Sphinx, whose hairless skin stays around 40 degrees Celsius. With all the pampering these cats get, the mice were quite happy to play. Still ahead, tomorrow's weather forecast. Biscuit-bombing army reservists. It's not easy to say. And Sports Tonight with Bill Woods.
Neither is that. Thanks, Sandra. We'll have all the talk from the track, including our Maze K's brilliant win, water polo, and doing it downhill on a mountain bike.
Well, a few showers in some centres today, but generally it was quite pleasant. The sun shone from Cairns down to Sydney before a few showers dampened Canberra and Melbourne. Across the south it was generally fine with some rain in the centre and north. The cloud has almost cleared, leaving a band across the centre and patches in the southeast. Any change should be gradual as that slow-moving high continues to dominate. So expect fine weather to continue tomorrow in the east, but showers forecast for Brisbane and 23 degrees. Hobart and Adelaide should also be fine. Perth becoming cloudy and 25. A late storm forecast for Darwin, the top there, 32 degrees. Well, it may not have been essential, but a biscuit bombing run over the Hunter Valley in New South Wales gave the Army Reserve some valuable experience. Airdrops are often vital, even in peacetime, when outback communities are isolated by flood or natural disasters. So members of the Army Reserve have given up their weekend to hone their skills. From 800 feet, they practice delivering food and other equipment safely to the ground below. And that's the late night news for now. I'll have our next National Bulletin at 5 tomorrow evening, but stay with 10 now for all the day's top sporting action in Sports Tonight with Bill Woods. I'm Sandra Sully. Thanks for joining us. Good night.
Featuring in Sports Tonight, Saturday, October 14. Our Maze K, the best 3-year-old in the land, now ready to take on the big guns in the Cox Plate. Australia on a roll in the pool, chasing gold at the World Cup. Taking it to the edge in downhill mountain bike racing. And those rallying men ripping round the forests in pursuit of the Australian Championship. Good evening, I'm Bill Woods. First up, racing, and the cash came out today at Caulfield for the first official meeting of the Melbourne Spring Carnival. A day of contrasts. Dane Wynn with a big win firmed for the Cox Plate. Our Maze K raised comparisons with Manikato. But the favourite for next Saturday's Caulfield Cup has been injured. Taradu failed to finish in the Caulfield Stakes. Peter Donegan was there.
The Spring Carnival officially began under overcast skies.